Were we waiting for Steph to disappear? Yeah.
No, I think you can start now, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Sarah from The Empty Cradle, and I'm here with Judy from Womanhood. We're joined by Narelle, Anne, and Rochelle for this webinar, Childlessness and Pets, Celebrating Our Unique and Worthy Relationships. Before we introduce ourselves, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where we live, work, and gather. In the spirit of reconciliation, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of Australia, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We pay our respects to their ancestors and elders, past, present, and emerging. In this time, when our ecosystems are in crisis and our non-human brothers and sisters are being decimated, we acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leadership and respect their ability to care for country. We honour this deep connection to land, sea, and culture, and through their wisdom, we come to understand that the land owns us. We are part of an interconnected web of life, not atop a hierarchy, and each animal has its own unique story and dreaming. We acknowledge that every Aboriginal person and tribe has a totem animal, and this spiritual connection carries specific responsibilities. We recognise their valuable contribution to Australian and global society.
Thanks for that lovely acknowledgement, Sarah. I think animals and nature can be such healing forces in our lives, and particularly so for us as we live with childlessness. So I guess when Sarah and I first started talking about doing this topic on pets and childlessness, so many people affirmed just how important animals are in their lives. So I guess it gave us a lot of impetus to do this session and to take it forward and invite people to join us. And in this session, we want to bring forward some of those stories about the meaning and bonds and joy and well-being that our animal companions bring. And it's We Are Worthy Day of World Childless Week 2022. So we also want to acknowledge, call out some of the stigma and stereotypes around childlessness and pets. And together with this wonderful panel and everyone participating and listening in, we want to bust some of those myths and reclaim our sense of worthiness as childless women and men and animal companions, fur parents, feathered or scaled parents, or whatever term you use to describe your relationship with your animals. We all have our individual and unique relationship with animals, and they with us. And some of you will have your animals right there beside you. Other animals might be doing their own thing. And some of you might not have your animals with you anymore. And some of you might wish for an animal companion, but not be able to have one right now. So we honour all of you. And we're really looking forward to a really interactive and kind of joyous session tonight. So we'll go around the panel and introduce ourselves and a little bit about us and then get into the content. So I guess to start with, I'm Judy Graham. I run a counselling practice in Australia called Womanhood, and it's specifically for women who are childless, not by choice. And I'm a Gateway Women Reignite facilitator. Central to my work and my conversation is my experience as a woman who is childless by circumstances. And for me, it's 10 years since I knew for sure that I would never have the children or the family that I had dreamed of. So tonight, today, I want to bring forward another part of my world, and that's my animal cat companion, Sasha, and introduce her into my story as well. So Sasha, or her formal name, Sashenka Babushka, she's a Russian blue and she's incredibly quirky, absolutely her own being, and makes me smile every day. I'm really happy to share that part of me with you. So can I invite Narelle, would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course, thanks, Judy. My name's Narelle Hudson, and I'm from Brisbane in Australia. I'm childless, not by choice, and I made the difficult decision about 12 years ago now to accept my childless status after many, many years of IVF and loss and a pregnancy that ended very early at 23 weeks. And I support others now in the community as a grief counsellor in my own private practice. I am also the author of The Baby Dream, Learning to Live with Infertility and Loss. And I support people through public speaking events like this one, just so that people feel less alone, like there's someone else who may get some of what they're going through, because I know this is a very taboo subject, infertility and loss, and we're not that great in society about talking about it, but events like World Childless Week are fantastic for us, shining the light on our lives and sharing more about those and having a voice to say that we're worthy, which is a beautiful theme of today. And tonight I want to introduce you to my fur baby, Raggles. He'll probably pop up at some point because he's never far away from my side. He's a ragdoll, and he's my co-counselor, I call him. He's always hanging out around the computer. He's usually lying behind it, and he supports me as I support others in the community. And I look forward to sharing more about him with you all tonight.
Thanks so much, Narelle. It's great to have you here. Anne?
Hi, thanks, Judy. I'm Anne. I'm from Melbourne, and I am childless not by choice. I disembarked the IVF roller coaster about 18 years ago, and like Narelle, had losses along the way. I'm now a grief and bereavement counsellor, and I run private practice called Life After IVF, which is a personal statement, and also playing on the word life, which is about there is life after IVF, and bringing that joy. And part of that joy for me was adopting my two beautiful fur babies, Viva and Joshi. They're in the screen there. And I look forward to chatting a little bit more about that tonight.
Thanks, Anne. I'm so glad that you're here to share as well. Rochelle.
Thanks, Judy. Hi, everyone. I'm Rochelle. I'm from the Central Coast of New South Wales in Australia. I am owned by a giant Maine Coon called Bentley. He's coming up to 10 kilos and 1.2 meters nose to tail and still growing. He's got a year and a half to go. So we shall see. I think he might be a Guinness Book of Records, but watch this space. I work for the New South Wales government, so I'm not in the counselling space. I'm in the change management space. Yeah, and I look forward to sharing more about just the joy that Bentley's brought into my life. I'm also childless, not by choice. Thanks.
Thanks, Rochelle. I'm so looking forward to hearing more stories about this enormous creature that owns you. And Sarah, I'll hand over to you.
Gosh, it's so lovely to hear about the joy that your animals bring to your life. It's just so lovely. I'm Sarah. I'm the founder of The Empty Cradle. I'm also a specialist grief counsellor focusing on the childless not by choice experience for women. With Judy, I'm a Gateway Reignite facilitator. And most importantly, I'm a childless not by choice woman. And I live with the ongoing chronic sorrow caused by involuntary childlessness. For my whole life, I'd hoped to be a mother. And when it didn't happen, I was shocked by the invisibility, stigma, shame, and also the lack of support surrounding this experience. It even felt like it lacked a language. This led me to founding the Empty Cradle in 2015. I work with women coming to terms with permanent involuntary childlessness. So what I'd like to do is to introduce you to my dog, Max, who's a Moodle. He came into our lives in the first years of us trying to conceive, and he passed away in June this year. One of the commitments that we make when we bond with our animals is knowing that their lives are likely to be shorter than ours. And we wanted to start the webinar by lighting a candle and take a moment to acknowledge the pets across all of our lives, both past and present. We acknowledge what they mean to us and the continuing bond we have with these beloved pets that are no longer with us. I'm just going to light a candle.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to light a candle as well.
Yeah.
And invite anyone at home, if they've got a candle and they want to have one handy, that they could light a candle too. And actually, you know, it just feels like such a lovely thing to honour our animals, because I guess in grief work, we do talk about continuing bonds, don't we? And how our animals continue to stay with us throughout life, like our hopes and dreams. So honouring is such an important part of healing and that remembering. So in the chat, or if you're listening in later, we'd love you just to, think about your pets, your animals, and perhaps if you're live in the chat thread, you might like to add in the name of your pet and introduce us to your pet, either current or departed, and tell us their name, perhaps their breed, and what you love about them. So feel free to share with the group if you'd like to. And if you feel able to, you can do some technology stuff and share a photo link in the chat thread if you'd like to do that.
That'd be amazing.
Light it up with animals.
All the pets and the animals that we have. Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah, for sharing that.
Yeah. So we wanted to start, the topic for today is worthiness, and that we are worthy. And we want to dive right into the topic of worthiness to start with, and particularly the way that as childless people, our relationships with our pets can sometimes feel a little bit unworthy. Oh, I'm just looking at some of the animals that are coming up in the chat thread. They just look so lovely. Cats and dogs and beautiful. Yeah. We can experience discrimination and social exclusion based on our non-parenting status. And this can happen through cultural stereotypes and the microaggressions which invalidate our identities and experiences. For example, pets, they're increasingly acknowledged as really valuable healing relationships and supports, as service dogs for the blind or companion animals for older people or people living with trauma. Yet the way that childless people and their pets can be talked about can have a particular negative flavour. Words such as crazy cat lady, dog mum, or comments such as we selfishly chose pets over children, or that our pets are replacements for kids, they can really be bruising. But they also hide the complexity and the value of these relationships. So in the chat, if you feel comfortable, we'd like you to share where there might have been words or experiences where you might have felt judged for being a childless pet owner. Yeah, and what that experience might have been like. So Judy, what have your experiences been around stigma of being a pet owner?
I think for me, Sasha came into my life after my relationship had broken down and I was moving into my own place. And so I was a single, childless woman with a cat. And that's 3 layers of social stigma that felt kind of pretty present in some interactions that I was having. And I think at that point, I hadn't heard Jodie or others speak about, you know, the crazy cat lady, but I felt that in some of those interactions. And I think I sensed that stigma with some of the judgy kind of questions or comments that people would make. And I particularly had a neighbor who would always ask me every time he saw me, "Where's your cat? You should bring her out. Isn't she friendly? What's wrong with her?" And it felt so judgy. And I felt really less than. I felt like he was judging me and who I was, and I wasn't a capable person. And so it just had this real undercurrent, which was really uncomfortable and it made me feel like I wanted to withdraw from him. And I guess it was another relationship that when I was thinking about stigma and these stereotypes and how it affected me, and there was one in particular, an aunt of mine always asked me, you know, really pointedly, how's Sasha sort of sidling up to me. And it really felt like, again, I felt really like she was judging me that that's all I had in my world and that I didn't have children. And it felt really pointed. And initially I thought she was really having a go at me, but it was actually a turning relationship for me that at some point I kind of realized that she liked cats and she told me a story about her always having had cats when she was young, and that I realized she was actually genuinely asking me about my cat because she wanted to know the stories. And it was a real turning point for me because I actually realized that some of my own self-pity about not having children was actually a bit of a barrier for me about opening to that relationship. So it was actually it was a really important turning point for me to kind of acknowledge some of my own shame and to let that go and to open up that relationship with my aunt. And we actually really increased our relationship connection for me being able to share with her about my cat and some photos and stories. And so I guess, it was a real opportunity for me to notice a little bit more deeply whether people were judging me or whether they were connecting with me. And here was this cat in my life now that was also providing an opportunity for new relationships or opening up relationships more deeply. And that felt really good. And so I guess, it shifted me to this place where I have a greater sense of owning my identity as a childless woman with a cat. And I don't think I'm a crazy cat lady. I'm definitely a cat lady and wore my cat top in honor of being a cat lady tonight. But yeah, I'm definitely a cat lady and I feel much more empowered about that these days.
And it's tricky, isn't it? Because sometimes we can feel those judgments can actually be about, like a cardboard cutout. It's very simplistic thinking, but when we have those opportunities to actually flesh out our experiences a bit more, or for other people to engage with that, it can sometimes be a connecting point, can't it? When, our conversational point, when perhaps children aren't there as a point of connection. So that feels really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I'm noticing in the chat there's some examples where people have made comments like, they're not your children, which is, we get it, we know. And then also other comments where the implication that they are my children and therefore my childlessness might not be as painful. Yeah, and one person has said that their fur kids, they actually don't replace their children, that they're, you know, a different kind of relationship. So Anne, when we were preparing for the webinar, you had some interesting reflections on the responses that can be both pitying and that, you know, the selfishness stereotype, such as you might have chosen pets over children. And I guess we wondered, what are your thoughts about pets as child substitutes?
Oh, great question, Sarah. For me, there's some people who see the pets as a child substitute, and for some people they're just pets. But to give you a little bit of background, I come from Malaysia. I'm of Indian descent, and when I was growing up in Malaysia, we had a few friends who were childless, and the snide comments that the aunties would make. You know, in Malaysia, we call everybody an auntie. So they would, oh, you know, look at that. Look at the amount of money they're wasting on their dog. You know, they should be giving that money to an orphanage, or why don't they go down and, oh, you know, adopt a child. And it was all about that whole thing about, you know, you're putting all this love and money into an animal when there are children in need. So I kind of had that cultural thing about, oh, you know, pets, they're kind of secondary, but I love my babies. And it was interesting because when I adopted them, I was working in aged care. And I used to take Viva in to work with me. And she used to have a dress, a very pretty dress. That meant, you know, she's at work. There's a different set of rules she had to follow. That was her training. I was carrying her one day and this man came up to me and he said, oh, you've brought your daughter to work today. Isn't she beautiful? And I thought, okay, like, has he actually mistaken Viva for a child because of, you know, cognitive impairment? And I looked at him and I kind of said, this is Viva, you know. And he goes, yes, I know she's not human, but you've got so much love to give. And when you don't have children and you're giving that love to her and you're treating her as your child, she's your daughter. And I was like, wow, what a different view to what I had grown up with. And it was really interesting. We were talking to Viva and Joshi's vet recently, and he was saying there's actually research coming out that pets fill that void that a lot of people have to give and receive love. So, you know, for people who are childless, not by choice like me, I have love to give. I like teaching. I like nurturing. I like, you know, being able to play games. I like buying pretty dresses. And so for me, they meet that need and they fill that void. Are they my child substitutes? Well, I know they're not human children and, you know, they will never replace the children I lost, but they're my children in a different sense. So yeah, so that's kind of where I'm with.
I love how you've explored that, Anne, around like childlessness. Many of us experience it as a real sense of assault on our identities as we're, you know, grappling with grief and sadness and anger and it might be envy and really difficult emotions. Pets give us that opportunity to actually express those other parts of ourselves and to kind of claim those other parts of ourselves, don't they? Which is really powerful.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I love that how you've described that these relationships, they're unique and valuable, but they're different. They're not substitutes, and that they stand alone. That often we diminish both our children and pets when we do that comparison. It's like these are actually unique and different and really precious relationships. So Narelle, I'd love you to come into the conversation and tell us about what your experience has been.
Yeah, so thanks, Sarah. My experiences have been a little different. I guess there was a stereotype as I grew up as a child. My mother was kind of referred to as a witch and everything because we always had so many cats around, and I think there was that stereotype that if you had lots of cats you were a witch, because yes. Another stereotype that's obviously hurtful at times, but that was the stereotype that was thrown around. But I guess my mom and I, we didn't care. It was just natural to us to have cats. I remember as I was growing up, I had 3. I had Gingerbread, I had Samantha, and our black cat, the witch cat, and Karula. Her show name was Karula Bell Noya. She was a beautiful black chinchilla Persian. And of course, Gingerbread was a ginger cat. So we always had those 3 cats in my childhood, and it just seemed normal to me. I sort of wore being a cat lady as a badge of honor. It was, you know, part of who I was. I've always had such an affiliation with cats, and I guess in a sense I didn't really care what people thought. Of course I wanted to be a mother more than anything, but when that didn't happen, it didn't change the trajectory of my life in terms of having cats around me, because that's always been part of who I am. Of course, it doesn't replace having a baby, but I believe even if I was fortunate enough to have children, I would have had cats surrounding me. One of my most sacred memories was after the infertility journey ended, my husband and I went to Africa for a couple of months, and just going on safaris and just traveling around and seeing all the big cats in their natural habitats, like, just resonates with me so much. As a child, I used to sort of wear my cat around my shoulders, and people used to be like, you wear that cat as a scarf, it's such a placid cat. So I guess I've always just had them around me. And ironically, when I was going through all my rounds of IVF, I had a cat who I don't think much liked me. She had quite a few problems. She was a rescue cat, and I think she had an eating disorder, and she used to actually like launch at me and attack me when she was hungry for food. And so she wasn't very supportive when I was going through all of my journey, all of my IVF and grief and loss. So yes, it's very lovely now to have a cat that is supportive. But as I said before, I wear that cat lady stereotype as a badge of honor. And as Judy said, I don't think I'm a crazy cat lady, but you know, I also don't like the word normal. I think we all have a bit of crazy in us.
Yeah, I love how you claim that. I imagine you in your world being very populated with cats, and it just feels really beautiful. Just feels such a resonance hearing you talk about your animals. Yeah, it's just so beautiful. And you know, a lot of these stereotypes are really underpinned by pronatalism, that sense that to be normal, that the world is, you know, to be an adult is to have children. And you know, it's almost like a lens where the experiences for people without children aren't even considered. And as we start to actually own it and tell our stories, what we're doing is we're actually really challenging those really simplistic ways of seeing us. It's actually going, no, we have really rich lives, and you know, we're going to offer them to you and tell you about them. But we're also actually going to be okay. We don't need you to accept us. We need to accept us. That's what matters.
Yeah. Awesome.
So Rochelle, how do you deal with or respond to these stereotypes? How do you and Bentley navigate your world? We've lost your audio, Rochelle. How's that? Yeah. No, we can't hear.
Dropped out.
Yep. So we might come back to talking about, yeah. How are we doing there? Might have a little chance to troubleshoot that. I'm sorry, we can't hear you yet, Rochelle. We might need to reset the audio on that. Yeah, so I'm just looking at some of the comments in the chat, which is we've been introduced to some beautiful animals, introduced to yeah, it's just so lovely to see everybody here, and welcome. And I love it that there's some people who are also saying that they're embracing what it means to be crazy. There's a lovely suggestion about a good book. What the ... is normal by Francesca Martinez. How you doing, Rochelle? Have we got your voice?
Any better?
Now? Yes, perfect.
Yep.
You're with us.
Okay.
So you're going to tell us about
Yay.
you and Bentley.
So in the chat, I just want to acknowledge I saw some things and I really related to that, which was normal is so overrated. Yes, it is. And then I embrace the crazy. Someone else said, so do I. I'm somewhere in the middle. So for background context, my husband and I lived in Sydney and then we moved up to the Central Coast just at the start of COVID. So I'm guessing about 2.5 years ago, and we had just ended our fertility journey and acknowledged we weren't going to have children. I'd had a hysterectomy, so definitely we weren't. And we'd had Bentley at that time for about a year, and then that'd be right, about a year, and then we moved up here. And because we're now in a coastal area in a smaller town, and we're in a home, but we haven't finished the landscaping. So we decided, in order to give Bentley the best life and the best outdoor experience, we would pop him in a pram and we would take him for walks, and he really got into it. So we started taking him to the cafes around here, and then we bought him a harness and a leash, and now he expects to go out 2-3 times a day. So as part of that, and we're in a really small suburb, it's very insular. My husband got no label, which was interesting, but I became known as the lady who walks the cat in the pram. And I'm sure there was a crazy in there, but not to my face. And it felt quite hurtful, I'm not going to lie. It felt odd. And then I decided just to embrace it, because Bentley was living his best life. He loves getting out and about. And what turned for us as well is that it was during COVID, and when we would take him out for his fresh air and his walk, people would come out to talk to us. And I knew a lot of them were elderly, and we were their only contact for the day, was to come out and talk to us and to pat Bentley and to ask questions. And no, he wasn't a dog. Yes, that was normal for his size. Yes, he's a special breed. No, we haven't lived here forever. It's new. We're from Sydney. And to also educate people. So we became a bit of an advocate for Bentley is both prey and predator. So to let him out on the loose is not responsible as a pet owner. And this is the way that we would manage that for him. And really pleased to say nobody addresses me as the lady with the cat in the pram anymore. And we've seen a few fur babies out in prams as well. We've started a bit of a trend, and we've made quite a few friends from getting out and about and people coming out to see us. So we turned what felt uncomfortable at the start to something that's really joyous now. And if we don't take Bentley out, people actually ask where he is. So yeah, it's been a good experience for us.
That's an amazing way to, like, even the caution at the beginning, but then to get to a point of connecting, and it sounds like a really nice way to bring you into the neighborhood and set the tone a bit. Yeah.
Thanks. It's been really nice to integrate into the community. And to be fair, we had way more people go, that is amazing. Look at Bentley, and ask questions and to say to us, good for you. It was just a few that niggled, and it was in me. It wasn't, now I don't care. And we love taking him out, and he demands it. So we really don't get that choice.
Bentley sounds like he knows what he wants.
He does.
Yeah. And when we were preparing, Rochelle, you had some thoughts as well around workplaces and and just how workplaces might take our relationships with our pets a bit more seriously.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I did. I thought it might be helpful to share something, a role that I've taken on at work. I no longer actually manage a team. I used to. And as it turned out, at that point in time, we were all childless, some by circumstance, some not by choice, and some were just younger. But we all had fur babies. And I noticed when the fur babies were sick, everyone was quite tentative around, oh, should I mention it? Should I? And I felt really blessed to be in a position to say that is absolutely a child for you. And if you need time off, you take it. Don't ask me. Just tell me that you're taking it and go, and we will pull together as a team and cover. And what it also did in doing that for my team, I kind of gave myself permission to do that as well. So after we got Bentley and we discovered that he was high needs, to say the least, I actually changed careers, so I didn't need to manage a team anymore, and I could work at home full time with him. And when I apply for contracts now, I consult, my first thing to mention is I have a child. He's non-traditional. He's ginger and he's furry, and he needs me at home most of the time. And so I'm prepared to come in a day a week, one a fortnight at best. And if that doesn't work for the team environment, that's okay, but this role is not for me. And nobody's questioned it. So it's been really nice to help normalize that. And I'll also soon be pushing for fraternity, or we could call it paternity leave as well in the workplace.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
so that's been fun, and really nice that just nobody questions it anymore. It's just, oh, Rochelle needs to be at home for her child. Yeah.
Wow.
So I hope to see more of that. I really do. I think it should be more normalized.
Wow. Yeah, we'd love to hear in the chat any of your experiences about, some positive experiences about being a childless pet owner, maybe where you might have had examples of, where you might have challenged stereotypes, or you've really owned it in terms of creating space in your life and what your pets have really meant for you. We'd love to hear from you about that.
There's certainly a lot of resonance in the chat thread, isn't there, around that empowered voice and what you're talking about, Rochelle, in bringing that to the workplace or bringing that to the community. What we're all talking about in actually speaking about our animals and the relationship that we have with them, that they're not just animals that we feed and clean up after, that they're actually relationships that are really important parts of our lives, whether we regard them as, our fur children, they're family, and that is, I guess, such a contributing factor to our well-being, and so I wonder if we shift gears a little bit and talk about some of those well-being kind of factors that our relationships with animals actually bring us this sense of well-being in so many ways. And, it's almost like one of the ways is speaking up about them and naming stigma or naming our relationships helps us feel more empowered. And I guess there's a lot of evidence and research around the mental health factors nowadays that animals bring us. So, like I read one study that said that 74% of pet owners actually report an improvement in their mental health and well-being as a result of their relationship with their animals. I mean, that's huge, isn't it? That they have such an impact on our well-being. And I think in regards to childlessness, when the grief and the social exclusion can really impact on how we feel about our sense of belonging and our sense of identity. Animals bringing improvements in our well-being is just so important to talk about. So I wonder, you know, some of the ways that we think about well-being might be physical, psychological, social, spiritual, and I know, Anne, when we were talking about this earlier, we talked a little bit about the physical well-being impact of animals, just that contact and that closeness or touch, and particularly with dogs. I wonder, would you like to talk a little bit about what that's meant for you and some of the research you've kind of been aware of as well?
Thanks, Judy. You've hit on my pet subject. Yeah, I did quite a bit of research into well-being and pets, and there is huge amount of evidence around drops in blood pressure, drops in cortisol levels, you know, mirror neurons, and the feel-good factor of, you know, when you look into a dog or a horse's eye, and donkeys too, I think, and how that reflects back in, you know, your feel-good factor rises. I can't think of the word at the moment. So there is heaps of evidence. And one research paper I read also said that people who had a heart attack and then were given a dog, in a year, their stats and blood levels and cortisol and everything was a lot more improved than people who'd had a heart attack and hadn't had a dog. And there was some dispute in that research paper because they were saying, oh, maybe it's because when you have a dog, you have to walk it, so you're getting exercise. So again, that's a well-being factor too. And like for me, when we finished IVF and I was feeling really terrible, one of the things was I often felt if on the weekends I had no reason to get up, I had no reason to get out of bed. You know, that kind of real low, flat, what's the point? And that has absolutely changed for me because I have to get up early at 6:30 and I have to walk the kids and then I have to feed them. And there's a whole lot of things that, you know, and I love doing this. And I found my physical and mental well-being has improved so much. You know, there's the exercise. And like I said earlier, it's also that, you know, I'm loving something, I'm nurturing them, I'm looking after them. The other thing also with pets and well-being is there's also a lot of research around actually talking to pets, believe it or not. And I think people would have read some of the research where people have pets into schools to help with autistic children. But I was working in aged care, and I would find that a lot of people would go, I'll talk to the dog, but I'm not going to talk to you. So you can only visit me when you bring your dog with you. So again, there was that sense of the dog understands me and I can talk to the dog and I can trust the dog. So that's part of the well-being as well. And one man I was talking to was actually talking about how he said, when I see how much your dog trusts you, I know that I can trust you. And then I feel better sitting here talking to you and your dog. So heaps and heaps of like people around you gain from the well-being as well, and not just you.
Yeah, oh gosh, Anne, there's so much in that, isn't there? You know, it's like that, you know, that physical regulating that animals help us do on a physiological level. Our nervous system calms and gets regulated as we come into contact with animals. And like you say, that talking to them, there's something about the fact that they don't interrupt. You know, they sit and they look at you with their eyes and their little faces that, you know, they just don't interrupt. They let you speak. And so as therapy animals, they can be so effective because of that solid kind of stable status that they have just sitting with you. I guess the other thing that really come forward for me in that getting you up and getting you going, I know for me, Sasha is my alarm clock. You know, she has a built-in sense of time and she comes and get up, get up. And even if I don't want to get up, and you know, there are times when you think, I just want to stay in bed. I just want to kind of mooch around. And sometimes that's great, but actually sometimes it's just feeling low. And when your animals get you up and get you going, there's something about that has helped me And the research kind of shows us that helps us develop our own self-care patterns. So our animals are caring for us often as much as we're caring for them. So my routines about sleep are so much better with my cat. She puts me to bed as well. They're just incredible. Sarah, I know you had a little story or a little phrase about that feel good factor.
Oh yeah, yeah. I used to laugh that Max. So there's this the hormone that the neurotransmitter that we have. The feel good hormone is the oxytocin, and that's kind of the mammalian. It's the cuddle nurture. And I used to laugh about Max, that he was my little oxytocin dealer. And so what he would do is he was little and he was super cute. He was champagne colored, and throughout the day I would see him, and even after 15 years I never lost that sense of, oh my God, you're so cute. And I'd give him a little cuddle and just that physical touch and the connection, and then I just get this really calming little hit really throughout the day, which was so helpful in terms of my sense of well-being. And I really noticed after he was no longer here, that was one of the things that I went, oh, I'm actually needing to actually think about other regulation strategies in terms of when I'm feeling a bit anxious, because he's no longer here to kind of give a little cuddle to. So yeah, like what you were saying, Anne, just really resonated for me around, just that calming and the structure and the well-being. It was just so beautiful to hear that.
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. There's so much there's so much that they give us. I'm just watching the chat thread as well, and there's so many comments about the way that our animals interact with us and wake us up or open the curtains, Rochelle, and do cheeky little things that get us going, don't they? They activate us in so many ways and also soothe us. So our relationships are so important. And often when we talk about mental health and well-being, it is actually through relationship. And I wonder, Narelle, you talked a little bit, or we've chatted a bit before around sort of, attachment and those sort of attachment relationships or attachment needs, and how being in relationship with another can kind of help us to heal some of the wounds of the past as well. And I'm wondering if you'd like to talk a bit about that.
Yes, of course, Judy. Thank you. I believe we are, as you said, relational beings, and we need to be connected and feel connected to others. And as women, we have that natural maternal instinct and that nurturing energy. And, when you become a childless woman, when that's not the plan, when you planned on having babies to nurture and look after and support and give all your love and attention to, then it can be difficult to know what to do with all of that nurturing energy that's still there. You still feel like you need to tend someone. And I know my husband would get over that if I was to nurture and tend him, and AKA nag, and have you got this, and would you like more of this, and can I help you with this? So I think pets can be a lovely way to sort of channel that natural nurturing quality that we have as women, to be able to tend to someone else, as Anne was saying, to know that someone else depends on us and needs a walk or needs food or gets us out of bed like your cat does, Judy. And I think that's really important, so that we feel that sense of connection that sometimes I feel is lacking when you can't be a mother, or at least it was for me.
I think, that's a lovely way of bringing that forward, Narelle, that, the opportunity to nurture and to care for another, and to bring that mothering, those qualities of nurturing and caring for, having a place and a way of expressing that, it can be so important to so many of us, women and I think men too, that caring for other. And there's something about that attunement of really tuning in to what another being needs and wants from us, and being able to tend to that, that makes us feel, I think, a little bit more whole. And that's that well-being factor that comes, doesn't it, from tuning in and caring for other. And, you know, I saw a comment in the thread around, you know, particularly like with cats and the little head bump or the little nose bumps. I mean, that's how I connect in with my cat, and doing those little nose bumps, and it actually feels really connecting. Like, I see you, hello you, how are you going? And that mutual relational giving and sharing, it just feels so full. So I wonder about the social. We might kind of bring that forward a little bit more as well. Like, we've touched on it a little bit already, some of the ways of like going out and social contact. And Rochelle, I know you shared in the thread around Bentley having his own social world and social page.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you want to share a bit about, I guess, almost the well-being factor of that social aspect that your relationship with Bentley kind of brings you.
Yeah, sure. That very unexpected. So for us, taking him out, it forced us to go out every day as well, to take a break from the desk, and to, you know, because if you don't take him out, he just bites you and bites you and bites you until you take him out. So there's no option other than to do that. He's got good boundaries around what his needs are, we'll say that much. So for me, that's been a benefit. I will also reframe my thinking around him opening up the curtains in the morning, having listened to the fact that that does actually get us out of bed on time. So maybe I'll practice some gratitude. And in terms of social, he has got an Instagram account because everybody that's met him loves him and wanted to see more. So I really just started it for that reason, so that people could see him if we weren't always out and about. And one of the unexpected other benefits we got from this too was I joined a Facebook group for Maine Coon owners, because I've never had one before and it's unlike anything I've ever experienced. And I needed help. And as part of that, I've built or become or been welcomed in this really beautiful community of people who support me with everything in terms of Bentley's needs, but also just checking on me and how am I doing. And so I've made some really, really good lifelong friends from that. And I joke about it, but it's true. It's like having a really lovely mother's group without all the mean bits that my friends talk about with theirs. Yeah, so for us, it's opened up a whole range of things. And when we go out without Bentley, we are quite invisible. When we go out with him, everybody comes to talk to us. And something else, just very quickly, I find really interesting is people will tell us all about their lives and their pets, and they'll bring out their photos and go, oh, hang on, that's just my kids, and swipe past. Look at Fluffy. And things like that. So that's been interesting and fun too, just to really integrate in different ways. But social connection physically and online has been a big part of what Bentley's brought into our lives. So I'm grateful for that.
Wow, it's just amazing how much this animal in your life, these animals in our lives, can open up relationship connection, isn't it? You know, to have your group, you know, I think that's something that can be so missing from our lives, not having the children and the mothers groups, and that's often where social exclusion really comes in for many of us, feeling like, oh, this is where my friends actually disappear into another pathway, and feeling really excluded. So to hear that you have this pet parent group is so wonderful, isn't it? And to check in on each other, like you develop your relationships with each other through the stories and connection of your animals, and that's pretty wonderful, isn't it?
It's been really, really beautiful, and it has filled a gap. And what's interesting, all my girlfriends who have children, some have openly said they're quite envious about my mother's group because it's so much nicer than theirs. So slightly smug about that. Yeah, it's nice. I get to have something too.
Yeah.
Mm.
And that sense of belonging, it's human, isn't it, that we all need these places, these places where we feel that sense of belonging and that people are looking out for us as well, that two-way relational stuff. So thank you for sharing that. I think you had some similar stories, and in that you have a bit of a group through your animals as well, a social group, is that right?
Yeah, I think, one of the secondary losses of being childless not by choice is missing out on things like, mothers groups and all that, that connection with other people and that. So there is a Havanese Facebook group, which we joined, and we meet, well, before COVID, we used to meet once a month. So we called it the Play Group. And it was just beautiful because it was just a whole lot of pet parents, and we talked about the dogs, just like Rochelle said, no bitchiness, no, any sort of negativity, because it's all about the dogs. It's all about getting together, having fun. And I made some amazing friends. In fact, found a whole lot of new friends, like you're talking about inclusion. If there's a sense of belonging, of being there. And there's some amazing people that I've met. Some of them have become very, very good online friends. And so one of them is actually related to my dogs because she has their great grandchildren, which is brilliant. And we always joke about being related. But yeah, just that whole sense of connection. And I just saw in the chat someone saying how they used to go for walks and they knew all the dogs' name, but not the owners. Again, you strike up a conversation. Like if I went for a walk by myself, nobody would talk to me. I'd be invisible. But when I've got the kids with me, people usually go, oh, hi, how are they? How's Viva? How's Joshie? I can bet you none of them know my name. So yeah, that whole thing about, again, just as Rochelle was saying, being able to form connections with the humans through our pets is also invaluable.
Yeah, it comes back to that well-being, that animals kind of connecting us to the world a little bit more deeply. In fact, very deeply, the getting up and going for walks or taking your animals out and having these connections, sort of looking up and out. Is just so fulfilling. It makes us fill up, doesn't it, to have these connections. And I know with dogs particularly, people talk about that social connection, and I love Rochelle's stories about Bentley, and I mean, now more people are taking their animals out in prams and cats on leads as well. So this kind of opening up of bringing our animals out into the world has been such a wonderful thing. I know not all cats go out in the world. I'm wondering about you, Narelle. What's your experience around, I guess, well-being or the social connections around having Raggles?
Well, he is an indoor cat, Raggles, so he doesn't go outdoors. And we have some lovely neighbours who take their cat out on a leash and they give him a walk, and he comes and visits Raggles at the door and they have a little friendship. But Raggles mostly just stays inside. So I guess that doesn't help me to get out and about and be social. I put something in the chat earlier, which is maybe the flip side of being social. I found that when I was in my darker times, when I was going through my grief, sometimes it was easier to be with the unconditional love of my animal than to be around people in those times where you don't feel like being social, or you don't feel like going out and about because people may judge you or make hurtful comments or cliches about, oh, so do you have children, or when are you having children, or all of those things that we hear along the way. So I know there were many times when I was going through my cycles of IVF where it actually felt more emotionally safe for me to be with my animal than to be social. And then, you know, that was many years ago when I was in those really dark places. I know we still have little triggers and there's still glimpses of dark moments here and there when we have those reminders. Our grief's always there, but for the most part, my life is not as dark as it was back then. And moving forward, you know, even being in the office when I was working for someone else, there were all the chats about the pregnant ladies and their, you know, concerns around pregnancy and motherhood and all of those things. But there was a little circle of us at the other end of the office, and we all had rag dolls. My boss had a rag doll, and a man who worked in the pod opposite me and myself, and we'd just come in every day with stories of what our cat had been up to that day, and we kind of started our own community. So I think that was a nice way of it being a bit more social and helping me to feel a bit more connected, because I love what Rochelle's doing, but for lots of cat owners, cats don't make us as social as dogs often do.
But at least not the norm.
There's something about animals choosing us, but also us choosing the animals that feel like the right fit for us, right? And I love the way you say, Narelle, that you know, sometimes just being with your animal is the stuff that you need. You know, just doesn't have to be the social stuff, but actually just that soothing, that being there, that physical contact, or just that presence, you know, that actually helps us feel soothed and calmer and connected. And that's really important. You know, I know for me as a single person, honestly, coming home and having Sasha walk down the hallway to say, "You're here," you know, that makes me feel so connected. You know, I just think about the times when I didn't have my animal at home and it was just me coming home. And you know, it is really hard coming home to an empty house when you live on your own. And so yeah, that sense of just you know, steady consistency, just being there, has been so important for me. I can't imagine not having an animal companion to be there on that day to day. So yeah, our animals give us much socially and just in our home lives. I guess it's you know, it's that reflection that our animals really are our family. And you know, what we're all talking about tonight is so different from, I guess, perhaps a working animal, but you know, that we are talking about our animal companions in that way, that they are our family. They're part of our day-to-day well-being and relationships. And I wonder if that almost shifts us into just maybe touching a little bit on almost that spiritual or the meaning side of our relationships with animals, and you know, I guess some of the wisdom that they share with us, or the lessons that they bring to us. And I wonder, Sarah, I know you had a lovely story about Max and the way, yeah, he taught you. And would you like to share some of that stuff around that secure base and with him?
Yeah, look, absolutely. Look, I'm all that you're saying is really resonating for me. And it actually, to be really honest, it just feels really affirming and validating, because for him, like over 15 years, it's not an ownership, it's actually kind of a relationship. And animals do this thing where if you really sit and observe them and observe the way that they interact with the world, there's just so much to learn from them. So I mean, one of the things to start with is I used to find that animals, that Max was just, they're so sensate, like their sense of smell, their sense of hearing, they're just so alive and present in the moment and present to what's happening. And Narelle, I could so relate to what you were saying around that sense of constancy and companionship. And they really do, like that sense of a connection and attachment and the importance of that relationship in your life. So one of the things that happened towards the end of Maxie's life, as he was getting more unwell, is that he used to do this thing for the last 6 months where he, it's actually a little bit naughty, but I'll tell it to you anyway. This story where, don't tell the neighbours. He used to go up the driveway and he'd go down the front of our property, down the road. He'd go up the driveway of the neighbours, and he used to do that every morning. And I used to wonder what he's doing. So one morning I actually followed him and he was up there doing a poop. That was where he'd go and do his little poopies, and then he'd come back into our property and he'd go, right, job done. And so he'd been doing it for a couple of months, and he got into this little routine around it. And as he got more and more unwell, his little world closed down, and we got a chance to kind of just learn from the dignity and the way that he actually lived his last days. And it was so beautiful because he would actually push himself to his capacity. It wasn't like he ever went, I'm giving up the ghost. He'd just go, oh, what can I do today? And what is possible still for me today? And it was just so healing around seeing the way that he would embrace life. But we had one morning where I got up and he disappeared, and I looked all over the property for him. And what he'd done is he'd done his little morning routine, and he'd got to the top of the driveway. He'd lost his footing and he'd actually fallen in the stormwater drain. And he hadn't hurt himself, which was good. But I went around everywhere, and I went, to the neighbour's property and everywhere. And eventually I came back and found him, and he was sitting there, and he just sat there really calmly and serenely. And it was just like he just completely had this implicit faith that I would come and find him and that he didn't have to worry. He just sat there, just waiting to be found. And it just made me really realize how much we had impacted on his life and his world and the life that we had created for him. And I guess for us, it was very much about being able to kind of honor some of those qualities within us that we weren't able to express through children, but we were able to really tune into his needs, and that sense of, it's not just mothering or nurturing. Like, I really think about it as being like attunement, where you're observing and you're noticing, and they seek you out. Like if they're distressed, they seek you out if they're in difficulty. And it's because they feel really safe and they trust you. And that is so precious in terms of the relationships in our lives and our sense of what we offer into the world. And I just think it's just really precious to celebrate that and to honor that. So it's just so lovely to share this space with you today and create space for these stories. It's really special. Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. I think, I noticed my little candle, and Steph sent me a message before saying it's really burning. And I think maybe the presence is strong amongst us of our lovely animals.
Yeah.
And it's something about that, and kind of seeing some comments in the chat thread around, like that spiritual, that kind of deeper level that animals can sense things in us as well that maybe we don't always sense with each other. But yeah, those examples of when we're unwell or someone's coming to their end, of animals kind of knowing and having a sense that of just being still and just coming to be by our side, and just this kind of wisdom of calming the energy. And yeah, there's just something otherworldly almost about the way that they can sense the needs of their humans. And I'm wondering, yeah, if there's other stories. And do you have any kind of reflections on that? And I kind of know, just working in aged care and having animals in that space sometimes, does that spiritual kind of resonate with you?
Yeah, I think so. They definitely seem to know when somebody needs attention. I know that sometimes, I mean, I always joke that Viva had her own client list and she had a list of people she wanted to see. But every once in a while, she would digress from that list of people and she'd go into someone's room. And, you know, unknown to me, that person might have been sick or they might have just received bad news or something. And she'd just go in, sit in front of them and just look at them. And immediately they would just start talking to her. And it was just amazing to watch. And I used to go, what is this child all about? But, you know, even like for me, if something's happened or I'm not feeling that great, just the way they come and just put their paw on your leg and just look at you, it's just beautiful. Yeah. And I think there's a lot to learn about. What I've learned a lot from them is sometimes just that power of sitting in silence and just sitting and companioning somebody, which, you know, is quite important in our work as well. So that's kind of my big lesson from them about giving comfort without having to talk.
Yeah, there's something about those eyes of stillness and just the deep wells and the deep knowing. And I agree. I think my relationship with Sasha has made me a better counsellor in terms of picking up non-verbals, like paying attention to the communication that's not words and sitting in silence. Absolutely calming. I'm wondering, before we kind of start to wrap things up a little bit, I'm wondering if other members of the panel might like to almost share just perhaps something that's a quirky element of your animal or animals that you'd like to share, you know, kind of almost bringing forth some of this joy. There's a lot of joyous stuff in the chat thread around cheeky things our animals do. And is there any particular kind of thing you'd like to share about your animal, something that brings a smile to your face when you think about them? You can see you thinking there, Rochelle. Is there any one thing? There might be multiple things.
Oh, there's, you know, so many. Nothing about him is normal, but I think one of the most endearing things he does, and interesting because we've never experienced that before, is when someone comes to the door, he runs to answer it first and he checks out whoever's there and makes sure he's comfortable with them before he'll allow them into the house. And he's very intuitive. There was one tradesperson he just didn't like. The man opened the door and he launched onto his leg and ripped him through his clothing. And he's normally so gentle. And it was someone that we didn't really take to either. So for me, that would be a quirky thing. He's very protective. I'm 100% sure he thinks he's a dog. And the other cute thing he does, which is odd, and I'm not sure why I mention it, but it's cute. He likes to nibble our earlobes in the morning. But only in the morning and only for about 2 minutes. And then he gets all embarrassed and he's like, I'm done. And just walks off like a typical boy.
2 minutes seems quite a long time.
And away he goes. So there's 2 quirks of many, but we'll keep it at 2.
Well, I think, you know, you did share the link to Bentley's Instagram page. So anyone that hasn't already clicked on that, I think will be, because Bentley sounds like so much fun. And I'm a follower now. I can see that. But yeah, chewing on the earlobe sounds incredibly intimate. You're mine.
It's a bit awkward, and he uses his teeth. So we've had to train him and go, no teeth. And then he stops. The vocab that they have. Oh, thank you, Michelle. Narelle, what about Raggles? There's something quirky that you'd like to share?
Oh, he's got so many quirks. As I was saying, my last cat before him of 16 years, Petals. She was very feisty and didn't really like cuddles or didn't like being around me or anything. But she had this like spiritual sense that she just know when someone needed her, and she wasn't a people cat at all to anyone. But I would do natural healing sessions and Reiki sessions on clients in my home-based practice at that stage, and she would literally come and lie on their chakra that needed healing in a session. And so I just wanted to add that into the spiritual section that we just left, because I just thought that's a lovely thing to mention. But Raggles, oh, he's got so many quirks. He puts his paws around my face and gives me a cuddle with his paws around my face like this. He comes and he sits in between my husband and I. If we're sitting on the couch, he has to force his way in between us, so he's in the middle. He does the same in the mornings. He'll have to come in for a morning cuddle, and he lies between us in the bed so he can be the center of attention. And he's got such a strong work ethic. I work from home, and he will literally camp outside the office door until I'm ready to open the door and go into work in the mornings. And if I go and have a lunch break or an extended lunch break, if I have a cancellation or a no-show or something, he'll literally come down to the bottom of the stairs and scream at me until I go back up to the office. I have to tell him on Saturdays, we don't work today. We're not going into the office. I'm having a day off, but he'll literally just camp there until he realizes we're not working today. And he spends the entire day just curled up behind the laptop, just chilling. And it's like he just has to be there all the time. But if I leave, we call him a little Klingon. If I leave the office, he leaves too, because he doesn't want to be there on his own. So he's got lots of quirks.
He sounds like your shadow. And yes, they all have their personalities. And it's so nice to be able to bring them forward and share in this space. Thank you, Narelle.
That's okay. It's the polar opposite to my last cat.
Sounds like a gift. I can see some people sharing some of their stories in the chat thread too. So please do. And do you have any particular quirks around Viva and Joshi?
My two are hilarious, but then, I'm completely biased. They've learned this new thing now where if my husband comes home late, so late is after their dinner, they stand at the door and they wait for him. But as soon as they hear him come up the stairs, they run, and Joshi will run and come and sit on the couch next to me. And when my husband walks in, they looks at him like, "Oh, you're back. Oh, we didn't know you were back." Whereas, they could have been standing at the door waiting for the last 15, 20 minutes. It's absolutely hilarious every day. So I don't know what that's all about.
Just the funny things that they do. It's like, what goes on in their heads? Oh, thank you, Anne. What about you, Sarah? Have you got any kind of things about Max that you remember?
I do, actually. I mean, the thing I used to love about him is that he'd do this thing where you'd kind of watch him. He was actually quite a really smart little doggy. So you'd watch him, his little brain ticking over and problem solving a new situation, or he'd pick up a new habit or something would happen. And the thing I loved about him was that he was just this bundle of joy, and he would just get so excited that you'd literally see him almost like shake and jump out of his skin. And when people would arrive, of course, they arrived for him. And when he was younger, he used to get so excited, he'd be on his back legs dancing like that. And one day a good friend of ours arrived, and he got so excited he actually peed on her foot. So he absolutely was this just little joyful being that it was almost like it was just like this celebration of being alive. And I so related to what you were saying, Narelle, that during the darkest times, he was the one that held the candle for me. He was the one that just went, "Hey, let's go for a walk, let's stay in life." It's such a blessing. And I just really feeling for each of you in terms of your pets, and just how special and important they are in your life, and it's so lovely to hear in the chat thread, you know, how that is for each of you. Like that feels really super special. So yeah, I just want to say thank you. It's just been really beautiful and soulful conversation,
isn't it? It's so nice to be able to share these stories, and you know, I think for me, Sasha, actually the thing that she brings me is laughter, and it's the laughter every day that is just so wonderful for me. And yes, one of her quirks, there are many quirks, but one particular one is that she loves really small shiny things. And so, like, not necessarily traditional cat toys, but if there's a little twist tie that's silver or gold, or just you know, a paper clip, she collects them but puts them in her food bowl when it's empty. So it's kind of like I'll go in and go, oh, it's kind of like, I'm finished, thank you. And rubber bands, all these little things that she just collects off my desk and takes them in her mouth. Oh, look what I found, and pops them in her food bowl. And it's just things like that that make me laugh and just go, you're a funny, crazy creature. And I think, again, you know, just living in a space by myself, having these moments of laughter are just so precious. And yeah, living life on her terms is also a really wonderful reminder for me to be me on my terms. And I love that about, yeah, how animals have helped all of us, I guess, here today, and hopefully help so many others, just, yeah, in busting through some of the stigma and shame that comes from childlessness and being excluded. That all these stories that we've shared today are so much about busting through some of that shame and really feeling so much more empowered and feeling whole in so many ways, socially, you know, physically, you know, our well-being. And yeah, it's just been so wonderful to share that today. I mean, we're coming to the end of our session, and we don't have any questions in the Q&A box because it feels like it's been a busy chat with people sharing. And I wonder if anyone did have a question that they wanted to ask anyone on the panel, you're most welcome to. We've got 5 more minutes left before we close off the session today. So if anybody wanted to ask a question, please do. But we're also following in the chat as much as we can because it's kind of flying by. But yeah, maybe as we kind of see if anyone asks any questions, or we can just follow the chat thread. For the panelists, we might invite you just to think about a closing comment for our session today. You know, we've talked about a lot actually, and you've shared a lot already, but yeah, maybe just a closing phrase or sentence about what this has meant for you. Maybe I'll start with you, Sarah.
Oh, look, this has just been, it's been really uplifting for my spirit. It's so lovely to just celebrate. And, you know, the thing about our pet relationships is they're very intimate domestic relationships. They're very private. So it's really lovely to bring them out into the light and to celebrate them with you. And, you know, I think it's absolutely about busting through that shame and being able to just go, yeah, they're really precious and we honor them. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah. Anne, what about you?
You know, I think for me, as I've listened to everyone and been trying to follow some of the chat as well, is just how much of a void our pets do fill in our lives. You know, the social, the physical, the mental, the spiritual, and just how precious they are, and, you know, how important it is to also learn from them, like we were talking earlier. So, you know, they're teachers, nurturers, and, you know, as much as we love them, they love us back as well. And that's just completely special, and can't put my words to it because I'm getting all emotional. But yeah, this has been great. I've really loved hearing all these stories.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Anne. Thank you for being here and for sharing. It's been pretty wonderful, hasn't it? Narelle, what about you?
My heart's just so full at the moment. I just feel so grateful to be here. I feel like all the people in the chat have been part of the conversation the whole time with us, and it's just been joyous. It's just been happy, and there's been so much laughter, and that often doesn't happen in the circles I mix in, where we're dealing with grief and loss and infertility and childlessness. So it's so lovely to see, you know, the joy that we can also experience even in our grief. So it's been beautiful. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Narelle. It's kind of one of those anomalies about grief, isn't it? That actually sharing and connecting is such an important part of healing our grief. And so I really want to acknowledge that, you know, that aspect of childlessness, and also, and, you know, particularly thank you to Sarah for being here today as well, and sharing your stories, Max, and bringing that forward, because, yeah, there's the bittersweetness of that. So thank you. And Rochelle, would you like to share any closing comments about what this has been like?
I would like to say thank you for including me and for the opportunity to speak. Hope I did it some justice. I've learned a lot from each of you tonight, so I'm really grateful for that. And I followed in the chat as well, and that's been, yeah, it's felt really, really inclusive. Bentley for president, absolutely, Sarah. We actually joked about that. We were thinking New South Wales Premier. Anyway, it
Sounds like he's already got too much power.
Best not comment on that. No politics. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun for me. Bentley brings joy to my life, and I'm always happy to share that. He's been a really big part of our fertility journey, healing component. I realise he's not a human child. But on that note, my mum has 5 human children, and she comes and watches him and she goes, oh boy, he's as much effort as one of you were. So who knows? But yeah, thank you.
Oh, thanks so much, Rochelle, and sharing that joy that Bentley brings, and the challenges as well. And now I know, Rochelle, you shared the link in the chat thread, but I'm wondering, for people that listening in, would you mind just saying out loud the link so that other people might be able to find Bentley on Instagram?
Oh, sure. It's long. There's a few Bentleys, but it's at Bentley_the_main_coon. But if you just searched hashtag BentleyMC, you'll find him that way as well.
Thank you for sharing. I know there was another Bentley Maine Coon when I went looking. So
rude. I know. It seems to be.
No, so the underscores are very important. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. Everyone that's participated in the chat, and for people listening in later, you know, we hope that yeah, the stories and the things that we've shared today really resonate, and yeah, encourage people to share their stories about their animal companions, their animal family, animal loves, and yeah. And I think we've done a great job at busting some of those stigma and stereotypes around childlessness and animals, or crazy cat people, or crazy fur people. So thank you so much, everyone, for participating today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Call it a wrap.
Thank you, everyone.